All right, so have you ever heard that idea that, like, humans are getting dumber?
Oh, yeah.
Well, what if I told you that our brains have actually been shrinking?
Really?
Yeah, for the past 10,000 years.
Wow.
It's not as bleak as it sounds, though.
Okay.
Today, we're going to be diving into this conversation with Joseph Henrich, who's an expert in human evolution.
Okay.
And we're going to explore this kind of counterintuitive concept of shrinking brains.
Right.
So we're on a mission, basically, to uncover how shrinking brains might actually point to, like, the power of a collective brain,
Interesting.
and why individual intelligence might not be the only key to progress.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
This idea really challenges what we think we know about intelligence. Henrik suggests that as our societies have grown, larger and more complex, our intelligence hasn't disappeared. It's actually become distributed across the group.
So instead of each of us needing, like, a massive brain to store all the knowledge we've learned to kind of share the load, like a network.
Yeah. Exactly. Think about like a beehive or an ant colony.
Mm-hmm.
On their own, individual bees or ants might not seem that intelligent.
Right.
But as a collective, they achieve incredible things. They build these structures, they navigate complex environments, they even wage war.
Wow.
All without a single leader telling them what to do.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. But human societies are a lot more complicated than an ant colony, right?
Yeah.
Are we really saying that humans function as a single superorganism?
That's the theory that Henrich is proposing.
Okay.
And it's a pretty radical shift in how we think about things.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if events like the Industrial Revolution, which we often attribute to these individual geniuses, were actually more about the collective knowledge and the social structures that made those breakthroughs possible.
That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that innovation doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's a product of the environment, the exchange of ideas, and all the efforts of many minds working together.
Absolutely.
But how did we even get to this point where we're so interconnected?
Well,
Henrich talks about a surprising factor, the spread of Christianity in Europe.
Right. And it might seem counterintuitive.
Okay.
But before Christianity, became widespread, kinship bonds were a lot stronger in Europe.
Okay.
People were loyal mainly to their families and their clans.
Okay.
And this really limited interaction and exchange of ideas between different groups.
So people were essentially stuck in their own little bubbles.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
But as Christianity spread, it weakened those family ties.
Okay.
People were encouraged to see themselves as part of a larger community.
Okay.
And this created new opportunities for interactions, relationships, and the mixing of ideas.
Right.
Imagine shaking up a snow globe.
Okay.
You suddenly have a whole new landscape.
Yeah, that's a great visual.
Yeah.
So are we saying that religion, which is often seen as promoting, strict rules and conformity, actually helped create the conditions for innovation and progress by breaking down those old social barriers?
That's one of Henrich's main points.
Okay.
And it really challenges our assumptions about religion's role in history.
Interesting.
However, he does say that there's a danger in too much structure.
Okay.
If things become too rigid, it can stifle creativity and lead to stagnation.
So it's a delicate balance
Yes.
between connection and freedom.
Right.
Too much control, and the system can't adapt and grow.
Exactly. And that brings us to another fascinating part of human history.
Okay.
This constant back and forth between expansion and replacement.
Right. History isn't a straight line of progress.
No.
It's messy with different groups, rising and falling.
Yeah.
Battling for resources and dominance.
Absolutely.
So Henrich highlights several really interesting examples.
He does.
Around 70,000 years ago, a small group of humans from the Near East started expanding outwards. Interestingly, these early humans eventually replaced other hominid species like Neanderthals and Denisovans.
Right.
And those groups had larger brains than our ancestors.
It's interesting, isn't it?
So bigger brains didn't necessarily mean they were smarter or more successful.
It seems like there's more to the story than just raw brain power.
Yeah. What gave those early humans the edge?
Well,
were they just more aggressive?
It seems like it was a combination of factors.
Okay.
Including technology and cultural innovations.
Right.
They developed new tools and weapons and social structures that allowed them to adapt to different environments.
So they were better equipped to survive and spread their genes and their knowledge.
Precisely. And this pattern of expansion and replacement continued throughout history.
Okay.
the Bantu expansion across Africa,
Mm-hmm.
the Austronesians sailing across the Pacific,
Right.
the wave of Neolithic farmers into Europe.
Right.
Each of these movements brought new technologies and ideas.
So it sounds like a constant game of leapfrog,
Yeah.
with different groups innovating and adapting
Yeah.
to gain an advantage.
Absolutely.
But how much of this was driven by brute force versus something else?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
While conflict definitely played a role,
Sure.
these expansions were often about more than just military might.
Okay.
The groups that succeeded were often the ones who had cultural and technological advantages
Mm-hmm.
that allowed them to outcompete others.
So it's not just about conquering territory.
Right.
It's about spreading ideas and ways of life.
Exactly.
Okay, but if it's all about this collective brain,
Yeah.
why didn't certain innovations like the wheel appear in some parts of the world?
Hmm.
Take the Americas, for example.
Correct.
They had the resources and the ingenuity,
Yeah.
but the wheel didn't show up there before European contact.
Right.
Why is that?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it gets at the heart of this idea of a collective brain needing the right conditions to thrive. It's a common misconception that the Americas lacked the wheel just
Mhm.
because they didn't have suitable animals to pull carts.
Right. They had dogs and llamas.
They did, but they weren't used that way.
Right.
Henrich argues that the absence of the wheel in the Americas
Mhm.
was likely because of social and technological fragmentation,
Okay.
a lack of the interconnectedness that fueled innovation in other parts of the world.
So even though they had the potential, something was holding them back.
I
The
know.
collective brain wasn't quite firing on all cylinders.
You got it.
Okay.
Remember those factors we talked about earlier?
Mm-hmm.
Population size,
Right.
interconnectedness, the ease of spreading ideas.
Right.
Eurasia had some big advantages in those areas.
Okay.
Larger populations mean more brains to generate and share ideas.
Right. And the east-west axis made it easier for innovations to spread across similar climates and terrains.
Yes.
Whereas the Americas, with their north-south orientation, presented a different challenge.
Yes. Plus, Eurasia had these well-established trade routes
Mm-hmm.
and cultural exchange,
Right.
especially in those lucky latitudes where agriculture flourished.
Right.
The Americas, while having their own pockets of innovation,
Yeah.
didn't have that same level of interconnectedness to really get those ideas flowing.
So it seems like connection and communication are really key to unlocking the potential of the collective brain.
Absolutely.
But how do you maintain that unity when societies naturally tend to fragment over time?
That's a great point.
Right. Think about language barriers, geographical distances, and cultural differences.
Yeah.
These things make it hard to stay on the same page.
It's like entropy.
Mm-hmm.
Things naturally tend towards disorder.
Right.
But Henrich points out that successful civilizations found ways to combat this.
Okay.
They developed shared rituals,
Mhm.
institutions,
Okay.
even marriage systems that bridged those divides.
So are we saying that things we sometimes view as rigid or outdated, like traditional institutions and social customs,
Yeah.
were actually crucial for keeping that collective brain functioning?
Exactly.
It sounds like they were the glue that held everything together.
Right. Religious and social institutions, often seen as constraints,
Yeah.
played a vital role in maintaining connection and shared knowledge.
Okay.
They provided a framework for cooperation
Right.
and helped to transmit those cultural values and beliefs
Mhm.
across generations.
It makes you rethink some assumptions about how progress happens.
It does.
It's not just about individual brilliance, but about building and maintaining the right kind of connections
You got it.
to tap into that power of the collective.
Exactly.
But that leads us to another big question.
Sure.
What makes humans so uniquely good at this cumulative cultural learning?
Yeah.
What sets us apart from other animals?
That is the question.
What's Henrich's take?
He believes it goes back to our ancestors.
Okay.
And the fact that they had to deal with unstable environments
Mm-hmm.
in those unpredictable conditions,
Mm-hmm.
learning from others was essential.
Right.
It was about survival. So instead of relying on individual ingenuity, we evolved to be good at tapping into the wisdom of the group.
It's like a built-in survival mechanism.
Exactly.
Right.
And it relates back to brain size.
Okay.
Maybe larger brains evolved not just for individual intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
but for absorbing and transmitting knowledge from the collective.
So our brains are wired for connection, for learning from each other, and building on the experiences of those who came before us.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's like we're all part of this massive interconnected network of knowledge and experience.
Absolute.
that keeps evolving.
But there's more to this story.
Okay.
We need to dive deeper into how this collective brain actually works.
Okay.
How knowledge is transmitted, what kind of information is most valuable,
Right.
and how this process has shaped human societies.
This is already so mind-blowing. I
Yeah.
can't wait to unpack those ideas even further.
Let's do it.
All right. All right. So we've established that humans are masters at tapping into this collective brain. But how does that knowledge actually get passed down through generations?
Right.
It's not like we're born with all the information we need.
I think you're absolutely right.
Right.
Henrich calls this process cultural transmission.
Okay.
It's like a big game of telephone where knowledge and skills are passed from one person to another,
Right.
one generation to the next.
Okay. But anyone who's played telephone knows how easy it is
Right.
for things to get messed up along the way.
Yeah.
So how do we ensure that the information we're passing down stays accurate?
That's a big challenge
Right.
for any society.
Yeah.
And Henrich argues that humans have evolved certain psychological mechanisms
Okay.
to help us learn from each other more effectively.
So we're not just blindly absorbing everything we see and hear.
Right, we're pretty selective about who and what we learn from.
So we're not just passive recipients
Right.
of information.
We're actively filtering and processing it.
Are you saying we have like built-in biases
Yeah, exactly.
that help us navigate all this information?
We have a natural tendency to pay attention to people who seem prestigious or successful.
Okay.
We're more likely to copy the behaviors of people who've achieved something that we want.
Mm-hmm.
We also tend to conform to social norms,
Right.
even if we don't understand why those norms exist.
So conformity, which often gets a bad rap,
Yeah.
could actually be a helpful strategy for tapping into the collective wisdom of the group.
It could.
It's about trusting the knowledge
Yeah.
of those who came before us.
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
These biases, while not always perfect, have played a huge role in our cultural evolution.
Mm-hmm.
They've allowed us to learn and adapt to new situations quickly
Right.
by drawing on the experiences of others.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly downloading updates
Right.
from the collective brain,
Yeah.
filtering out the bugs and keeping the software up to date.
Exactly.
But what kind of information is most important for a society to be successful?
Right.
Is it just about practical skills, or is there something more?
Henrich makes a distinction between practical knowledge
Okay.
and social norms.
Right.
Practical knowledge is the how-to stuff.
Okay.
How to hunt, build shelter, farm the land, create tools.
Right.
It's essential for survival.
It's like the basic toolkit
Exactly.
for navigating the physical world.
Right. But social norms are also really important.
Okay.
The unwritten rules and values
Mm-hmm.
that shape how we behave
Yeah.
and how we interact with each other.
Okay.
These norms help us understand what's acceptable
Right.
and what's not.
So it's like having a set of traffic rules
Exactly.
for society.
Yeah, everyone knows how to behave.
Right.
So things run smoothly.
Makes sense.
And some of the most successful societies throughout history
Mm-hmm.
have been those that developed really strong social norms
Okay.
around trust, fairness, and cooperation.
So it's not just about being smart or inventive.
Right.
It's about creating an environment where people can trust each other
Yeah.
and work together.
That's-
Henrich uses the term ultrasociality
Yeah.
to describe this human capacity for large-scale cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure.
It sounds like we're going beyond just being social animals.
Ultrasociality refers to our ability to cooperate
Okay.
in huge groups of genetically unrelated individuals.
Oh.
Most animals only cooperate with their close relatives,
Right.
but humans can form bonds
Yeah.
and work together with people they've never met
Right.
based on shared beliefs,
Yeah.
values, or goals.
It's like we can go beyond those instinctual family ties
Right.
and build connections based on something bigger. It's what allows us to create these complex societies
Mm-hmm.
and achieve things that would be impossible for individuals acting alone.
Precisely.
And Henrich argues that this capacity for ultrasociality was really crucial for
Yeah.
the rise of large-scale civilizations.
Absolutely.
We had to develop ways to get over those natural tendencies
Right.
to favor our own kin in our small group.
In order to build and sustain larger, more complex societies.
So what's the secret sauce?
Well,
What allowed humans to break free from those limitations?
language is a big part of it.
Okay.
It lets us communicate complex ideas
Mm-hmm.
and coordinate our actions
Right.
in ways that other animals can't.
So language is like the operating system
It is.
for human cooperation.
It allows us to share information,
Mm-hmm.
build trust, and establish those important social norms.
Absolutely.
And we're really good at internalizing those social norms.
Yeah.
We don't just follow rules blindly.
Right.
We develop a sense of shared identity
Right.
and purpose.
Makes sense.
We learn to value fairness and reciprocity
Okay.
and to see ourselves as part of something larger.
It's like we're programmed to be team players.
Yeah.
Even with people we don't know.
Right. It makes you wonder about the role of religion in all of this.
Yeah.
Henrich suggests that it's been important in fostering these shared beliefs and values.
Right. Think about rituals and ceremonies.
Huh?
And sacred text.
All these things create a sense of unity and purpose that goes beyond individual differences.
Okay.
They give us a way to understand the world
Right.
and our place in it.
And they reinforce those social norms that are so essential for cooperation.
It's interesting to think about religion from this angle.
Yeah.
It's not just about personal beliefs, but also about creating that social glue that holds us together.
Right. But if this collective brain is so important,
Yeah,
what happens when it breaks down? We've seen throughout history that societies can collapse
that's true.
or decline.
It's a critical question.
Right.
And Henrich addresses it directly.
Okay.
Like any complex system, societies are vulnerable to breakdowns
Okay.
in communication, trust, and cooperation.
Right.
These breakdowns can have terrible consequences,
Yeah.
leading to conflict, stagnation, and even the collapse of entire civilizations.
So the danger isn't just from outside threats,
No.
like invasions or natural disasters.
It can come from within.
Right, like a collective brain drain.
Exactly.
Where we lose the ability to function as a group.
That's what we'll be looking at in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay. Okay, so we've talked about the amazing power of the collective brain,
Yeah.
but it sounds like this system isn't foolproof.
Right.
What can cause these breakdowns in communication and trust that you mentioned?
Well, Henrich talks about something called cultural drift,
Okay.
where like small errors in transmission or subtle changes in values
Okay.
can build up over time.
Right.
Imagine making a copy of a copy of a copy. Eventually, the image starts to get blurry.
Right.
Important details get lost.
Yeah.
The same thing can happen with cultural knowledge.
So it's not like someone's deliberately messing things up.
No.
It's more of a gradual erosion of that shared understanding.
Right.
A slow drift away from what made the collective brain work so well.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this drift can get worse because of things like geographic isolation, social inequality,
Right.
or rapid technological change.
Makes sense.
When a society is fragmented or goes through a lot of change,
Yeah.
it's tough to keep that shared knowledge and those values strong.
Right. It's like static in the signal.
Yeah, exactly.
So if people are living in their own separate bubbles, or if they feel like the system isn't working for them,
right.
they're less likely to believe in the shared story.
They might start coming up with their own interpretations or looking for different sources of information.
Yeah. And what are the consequences of this cultural drift?
Well, they can be pretty big.
Okay.
Henrich says it can lead to less innovation because people aren't as willing to share ideas or work together.
Okay.
It can also erode trust in institutions
Right.
as people lose faith in the systems that are supposed to run things.
Yeah. So it's not just about losing knowledge or skills. It's about losing that sense of shared purpose.
Yeah.
That willingness to work together.
Exactly.
It's like the collective brain can't solve problems or adapt to new challenges as well anymore.
And it makes you think about historical events differently,
Okay.
like the fall of empires or the rise of extreme ideologies.
Right.
Maybe it wasn't just bad leaders or outside forces.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a deeper breakdown in the collective brain.
A loss of that shared understanding and trust.
Exactly.
It's kind of a scary thought.
It is.
But it's also a reminder that we need to take care of our collective brain.
We do.
We have to be proactive about protecting and strengthening those connections that allow us to succeed as a society.
Henrich has some ideas about how we can do that.
Okay, what are they?
He says, it's important to have institutions that promote trust and fairness.
Okay.
Education systems that teach people how to think critically.
Right.
And a sense of shared identity.
Okay.
And social practices that encourage cooperation and empathy.
So it's not just about having more knowledge.
Yeah.
It's about creating the right conditions for that knowledge to grow.
Exactly.
But what does all this mean for us today? We're more connected than ever before, thanks to technology and globalization.
Right.
But we're also dealing with some huge problems.
We are.
Climate change, political polarization, misinformation.
It's a complicated situation.
It is.
Henrich doesn't claim to have all the answers.
Of course.
But his work helps us understand the challenges and the opportunities of our interconnected world.
Okay.
We need to figure out how to build a global collective brain
Right.
that's resilient and adaptable
Yeah,
so we can handle these challenges.
that's a big task.
It is.
Are we really up to it?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah. Do we have what it takes?
I think Henrich's work gives us a reason to be optimistic
Okay.
by understanding how the collective brain works, how it changes, how it functions, and how it can break down.
Yeah.
We can start to figure out how to make those connections stronger,
Right.
the connections that make us human.
I like that.
We can learn from what worked and what didn't work in the past and use those lessons to deal with today's problems.
This has been such an interesting conversation.
It has.
We started with shrinking brains.
Right.
And ended up talking about the potential and the risks
Yeah.
of the collective brain.
It's amazing how connected those ideas are.
It's clear that progress isn't just about individual brilliance.
No.
It's about our ability to connect, cooperate, and learn from each other.
I completely agree. That's what makes us special as a species.
Yeah.
Our ability to tap into the collective wisdom and experiences of others. That's our biggest strength and our greatest hope.
If you're interested in learning more about these ideas, check out the full conversation with Joseph Henrich.
We'll put a link in the show notes.
Okay, great.
And until next time, keep those collective brains humming.
Good advice.
Think critically, have good conversations, and never stop learning.
I love it. That's a perfect way to end this.
I think so.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.